Why do we learn to code? There are obvious answers to this question, of course, like becoming a data scientist or a software engineer or a web developer. But what if you're not trying to pursue a career in coding? How could learning how to code benefit you at all? Hi, I'm Sarah Davis, and for the vast majority of my life, the answer to that question was, it wouldn't. And I successfully managed to not learn a single thing about coding or computer science at all for the first 20 years of my life. It wasn't until I was almost done getting my Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree that I even reluctantly took any type of coding class at all. But that class wasn't about data analysis or engineering like I assumed coding classes would be. It was about making music. And as we'll soon find out, that class completely changed my outlook on coding, and it also completely changed my life. In that class, we learned about something called live coding, which is the practice of writing computer programs live, with the output most commonly being music or visual art. Live coded performances are often accompanied by a projection of the performer's computer screen so that the audience can see their process. Live coding exists in many other areas as well, like dance, data visualization, poetry, hacking, weaving, the list goes on. But today, I'm going to be talking all about live coded music. And the best way to explain exactly what that is by showing you. So as you can see, I have my computer, and I have a window open to write some code. And that's all you need to get started. I'm going to start with something really simple by just asking the computer to play a single note. So as you can see, I wrote play, which is how I tell the computer to play a note, and then I wrote which note I want the computer to play. I can also play 2 notes at once. If I want these notes to be played separately, I can write them like this. And if I add some code that instead defines this block of code as a loop, this sequence will repeat indefinitely. And if I instead define this loop as a live loop, this exact sequence will be editable while the code is running. And instead of picking individual notes, I can also ask the computer to pick any note within a scale to make things more interesting. So that live editing element is actually super important because it means I can take this code I've written and actually build on it while it's running, making it possible to perform the code. In this context, code becomes much more congruent with playing a live instrument, like playing the guitar. It becomes an artistic medium and one that can be an outlet for any musical genre. With a medium like code, which is dependent on the presence of a computer, many people assume that live coding is this thing of the future, when in fact, this process of using computers to make music has actually been around for quite a while. The first example dates all the way back to 1956, when 2 professors at the University of Illinois created computer-generated sheet music on the country's first ever supercomputer. So people have been interested in the relationship between computers and music since, well, as early as they possibly could. The issue at the time, though, was your average person didn't have access to these computers. They were only accessible to people who were studying them in research labs, and the subjects they were focused on were things like astronomical predictions and vector processing. So the real progress in computer music didn't come until around the 1980s, when personal computers started popping up. It was then, for the first time, that people were able to use computers to play. And thus, for some, the computer actually became a creative outlet. Later on in the early 2000s was when the live code scene as we know it today really began to develop, and groups, albeit small groups, started popping up all over the world, united by their shared interest in advancing live coding in all creative areas and a collective acknowledgement of the importance of accessible collaborative code. By the time I learned about live coders had been making advancements in nearly every creative area of live coding you could think of, and these amazing live code performances were taking place all over the world, and the live code community was strong and growing and collaborating on all sorts of incredible projects. And yet, so few people outside of the community had heard of live coding still. As a new fan of the art form, I wanted to hear and see live coding on huge stages at festivals and on club dance floors everywhere. I wanted more people to see how cool creative coding could be. So I thought, maybe I could play a role in that. As someone who discovered an interest in live coding from nothing but an interest in trying something new. It was then that I began my music career as DJ Dave. And I started making and performing live coded music in an area that was relatively untapped at the time. One that I thought could act as that missing piece between the trailblazing live code community and the rest of the world. And that area was pop music. The way I define pop is a little bit different from the conventional definition. While we know pop to mean songs that we hear on the radio or a certain genre of music, I like to go with the alternative definition, which is music that appeals to a very wide audience. Live coded pop I define as music that appeals to new audiences, ones that maybe have no coding background or even no interest in coding at all, which happen to make up a good portion of music enjoyers and rave goers. I wanted to make music that built a missing bridge between live coding and people who are not live coders by showing them something I had discovered in a way that helps them discover it too. As DJ Dave, I perform in front of audiences and at venues that have often never seen or heard of live coding before. I uphold those basic principles of live coded performances like projecting my computer screen, while also experimenting with new methods that make my performance more adaptable to these new spaces. One way I bridge the gap between live code performer and new audience is through storytelling. And by that, I mean using different methods to key the audience in on my process and help them actually understand what it is that I'm doing. In that demo earlier, for example, you followed along. You watched as each line of code I wrote corresponded to some adaptation of sound. And that's a really great start. So now that we have that foundation, I say we ramp it up a little. I'm now going to show you how I begin to make a song with code, and I'm going to start with that scale from earlier. I've been making and performing live coded music for a few years now, and I still often reflect on how far my current mindset around coding has come, given the misconceptions I once held. Like many, I thought of code as a problem-solving tool only, but with live coding, I learned it can actually be an artistic medium, one that you can sculpt and have a dialogue with no problems to solve at all. There are endless ways that we can interact with code, or even use code to interact with each other. Sometimes I wonder why certain skills get put into this box of being just functional, or even just creative. Why is code functional, but a guitar is creative? Why do we paint and draw for enjoyment, but we use mathematics to solve problems? Maybe what we think we know about these mediums is actually the very barrier preventing us from seeing their true potential. Most innovation comes from this idea alone of simply looking at things differently. There are many things in life that we write off because they don't seem worth our time, or they won't bring us closer to a goal, or maybe they just seem boring altogether. But to that I would say, how do you know? Your newest obsession, career, or lifelong passion could be out there waiting to be discovered right now. And maybe all you need to do to find it is to take that random class or try out a new skill, even one that might scare you or seem completely useless. Maybe all you have to do is to be curious, to challenge your preconceptions of things, and to play. Thank you.